In the Xinjiang continent, there exists a power which can cultivate immortals. An immortal once said something when he broke through. He had discovered an unusual and a new version of immortal cultivation. Since then, the Xinjiang continent hastily started a generation of major immortal cultivation. Jiangping City, a small town where mortals live and work in peace. There were beams of light of different colors piercing through the sky as the cultivators broke through, and the mortals exclaimed in surprise. Our protagonist Yifeng, the traverser, is sitting on the chair, not surprised by what just happened, as he complains how lucky they are to break through. It all started 5 years ago. Yifeng was playing the Immortal Cultivation Simulator for 90 straight hours and achieved the traversal achievement. That is, sudden death. He traversed to the world of immortal cultivators, and although he was a little shocked at first, he immediately calmed down. It felt like a dream to him. He was anticipating him getting a system. Suddenly, muscular man with disgusting face crushed Yifeng in his arms. It was Golden Finger, in other words, system. He goes on to explain about the system which could help Yifeng acquire with martial arts unparalleled in the world. Yifeng, filled thrilled, starts thinking about him to cultivating in this world, practicing divine powers, exterminating the sects as he dreams of having a beautiful harem. In short, the system would help him upgrade all his martial skills to the maximum level, and also provides Feng a 600 square meter martial gym, making him dumbfounded. Yifeng exclaims out loud about finally starting his cultivation journey, but he finds out from the system that he didn't have any spiritual roots, rendering him unable to practice cultivation. The system vanishes as the Feng stands there dejected. He tries going to many spiritual root testing center, but to no avail. The result always turned out the same. Even the examiner is surprised after finding out that a person without any spiritual roots actually exists. There are 10 realms of cultivation introduced, starting with the martial practitioner realm, martial master, martial grandmaster, master venerable, martial king, martial emperor, martial ancestor, martial celestial, martial saint, and martial supreme. Yifeng, after getting depressed, decides to live his life as a salted fish from then on and sets up a stall where he sells books. Suddenly, 2 female cultivators, one a child and the other a cold-looking silver-haired woman with hot figure, arrives at his stall, and the kid is excited looking at the books, runs towards him. Yifeng, seeing this, changes to his elegant mode and tries to serve the customer by tricking them so that he could earn some gold to make a living. But the woman with big breasts thinks nothing of the mortal in front of him and drags the little girl out from there. The kid struggles, making the woman even more angrier, and she then snaps out on the kid. After some time, she finally gives up and gives some change to Yifeng to buy the books from him and leaves without even turning back, as Yifeng gets angry because the amount paid was less than the price of those books. After they reach outside Jiangping City, the girl shows the book to the woman and she decides to take a look at the book's content. Just as she opens the book, a large amount of enlightenment Kai bursts forth from the book. What she felt at that moment was something that only cultivators could sense. It felt like a lonely being was abandoned by the galaxy, like being surrounded by enthusiasm you'd see in a festival or carnival. It was pure martial arts. Suddenly, a large aura converges around her as a beam of light shoots through the heavens, and just like that, she breaks through. She had been working so hard to break through, but all of her efforts were in vain. And only after reading one page of the mortal's picture book, she broke through to the Grand Martial Master realm in an instant. The little girl named Luo Lai, worried, runs towards the woman, and she realizes that even Luo Lai had broken through several times, comprehending the realm of the martial master. Just then she deducts the possibility of the mortal being a world-class expert, and decides to talk about it with her master as soon as possible. A fierce battle is going on between the cultivators and a monster, Lu Qingshan, the head of the Castle Peak Gate, and a martial spirit realm cultivator jumps in front of the wolf-like monster with his halberd to strike it down. Just as he was about to finish it off, Ning Xuanwu, an ancestor of the Xuanwu clan, attacks from the back to steal the kill. And as he does so, a fierce purple-hazed aura surrounds him, leading to a breakthrough to the Martial King realm. Lu Qingshan, who had his kill stolen even after they spent months hunting the demon and suffered heavy injuries by him, gets angry as he questions Ning Xuanwu's martial ethics. He also realizes with worry on his face that the spiritual power he had just absorbed helped Ning Xuanwu to break through to the Martial King realm. Just then Ning Xuanwu proposed a bet where they were going to fight 3 days later, and if Lu Qingshan won he'd let them go, but if he lost, the Castle Peak Gate would get swallowed up by the Xuanwu Gate. On the other hand, the same news of what happened with Lu Qingshan was heard by Yifeng from the reporter at Jianping City. Qingshan Gate, the disciples of the sect were training together while they discuss about the future of their sect. The master had also gone in retreat attempting for a breakthrough so that he could come out victorious in the duel which was going to happen 3 days later. Just as Lu Qingshan was worrying about how he could possibly beat Ning Xuanwu, his disciple Lan Zu comes in and asks for meeting with her master, where she tells him about the book she bought from a mortal which helped her break through to another realm, to which of course the master replies to her with the same words she had spoken to her junior sister and rebukes her. Lan Zu then requests him to at least take a look at the content, which he does after thinking about it for some time. The same scene occurs as Lu Qingshan achieves the enlightenment condition, and we get a glimpse at his inner mind, after which he finally breaks through to the martial king realm. Lu Qingshan then asks Lan Zu to follow her to pay the respects to the martial master who helped them, as Lan Zu recalls about how she earlier spoke arrogantly and offended the Lord without even thinking. She worries about what would happen if that actually angered the senior. Her castle peak gate would possibly get destroyed by the senior. While in the city, Yifeng was making a meat dish, waiting anticipatingly for it to get ready with the money he got from selling the book to the 2 cultivators. A purple-colored dog suddenly rushes out from the side with a piece of meat on his face and other humans on the chase. The dog was actually the prince of the wolf clan in the demon world. Even his realm was equivalent to martial soul. He had been framed by his fellow clan members, and his spiritual powers were almost exhausted as well. As he is running, he sees a white-haired mortal standing in the way, and decides to kill him by tackling him with his leftover powers. Yifeng, who was cooking leisurely, gets surprised but turns and catches the dog with his bare hand, making the wolf prince dumbfounded. The dog decides to unleash all of the power which he could to try and kill the mortal who had grabbed him, but it results to nothing than the food being toppled over, which in turn angers Yifeng as he decides to just eat the dog he just caught, making the wolf prince scared shitless. He wonders just how strong the mortal actually is as he lies down on the ground scared to excession, and we see Lu Qingshan and Lan Zu heading towards Yifeng to pay their respects to him. In the Jiangping market, a green-haired kid all bruised gets cursed at by the others. It is mentioned that the kid does not have any spiritual roots and is warned not to enter the Qingshan gate ever again. The kid named Zhang King drops on his knees as he laments about his poor fate. Yifeng, who just happened to be present there as well, asks, mistaking him for a little girl, if he was a thief and should pay if he wanted to eat the meat. Zhang King, with his last bit of pride which he had left, refuses him but gives in after breathing the aroma of the grilled barbecue and starts munching at the food very quickly. Yifeng asks about the circumstances of the boy and somewhat relates to him as well. He offers him to follow him to his martial hall to help him out and goes on ahead, asking him to head there before him. Zhang King, who took the key, looks at the departing figure with a hint of curiosity and gratitude and decides to go to the martial hall. Half an hour later, Lu Qingshan and Lan Zu arrive at the martial arts hall and are shocked to see the elegant courtyard with weird statues and strange paintings. Lu Qingshan looks at the paintings and realizes in shock how extraordinary the paintings were. Zhang King, who is busy cleaning the hall, finds them and finds out they were from Qingshan Gate after having a talk with them. He suddenly starts begging them to spare him, and that action gets misunderstood by the two as they think it was a test presented before them by the senior. Lu Qingshan, seeing the feather duster in Zhang King's hand, comes to a conclusion that in the first trial they faced they had to clean the dust and get rid of all miscellaneous thoughts. They proceed to clean the whole martial hall as Zhang King screams from beside but gets ignored by the two, making him even more dumbfounded. At night, in the martial arts courtyard, Yifeng, after taking the payment for the book from them, asks them to stay for dinner. The master and disciple have a chat between them about the senior. Lu Qingshan talks about the slicing technique of Yifeng being unfathomable, and the wolf tied up by the side was in fact a sky-devouring wolf, which made them hesitate and think if they should really eat such a demonic beast. Fearing a counterattack from the demon race, suddenly the demon wolf breaks free from the ropes and begs Yifeng in human tongue to not eat him. Yifeng, remembering about the dog he raised in his previous life, decides to take in the wolf as his pet. Seeing this brings tears to the eyes of Lu Qingshan as he praises Yifeng's kindness. They think if it's this way, then borrowing a magic weapon from the senior would not be a problem. Lan Zu recalls how the knife Yifeng had just stunned the demon wolf, who was at the pinnacle of martial arts, and begs him to lend them that knife to save their sect from extinction. Lu Qingshan, fearing that they expose their greed in front of the senior, hits Lan Zu but gets stunned again, when Yifeng just casually lends them their knife, saying he could make 2 to 3 knives a day easily. Lu Qingshan is brought to tears again as he rejoices and thanks the heavens for the blessing. In the Xuanwu sect's secret room, Ning Xuanwu was sitting after finally coming out of the retreat, and before him were his fellow disciples. He asks for everyone to leave besides the messenger Yu Wuji from Qingshan sect, and learns that what he was worried about that day had indeed happened. In the secret room of the Xuanwu sect, Yu Wuji relayed that the ancestor of the Qingshan sect had stepped into the realm of Martial King not long ago. Ning Xuanwu, who had been in the Martial King realm for over 30 years, shrugged it off, describing the Qingshan ancestor as nothing but a toddler in comparison of him. Yu Wuji describes how the sect master hurried back from the outside and summoned all his disciples to 3 Square. At the Qingshan sect square, the disciples along with the sect teachers Yu Yun and Yu Wuji gathered as they head towards the test jewel, which was an extremely tough and indestructible giant rock. Even a heavy blow from a magic weapon would only leave a few scratches on it. Lu Qingshan stands in front of the rock with the knife he got from Yifeng as the onlookers are confused as to what their master was trying to do with a broken knife. Lu Qingshan, feeling nervous, decides to just gently touch the rock with a tap, but just as he does so, an explosion sounds emerging from the tip of the knife, covering the whole rock as the Kai contained within the knife shoots up into the sky, decimating the giant rock along with it with ease. The explosion is so big that even Yifeng, living in the Jiangping city, saw it as the debris was heading towards them. Yifeng mistakes it for a shooting star and just prays for a beautiful harem, lots of money, and an easy life. While back at the Qingshan sect, everyone had a joyous mood as they looked at their master, exclaiming about their obvious victory against the Xuanwu sect. Lu Qingshan, after experiencing the might of the knife, infers Yifeng to be at least above the martial ancestor realm. Ning Xuanwu, who just heard the detailed description that Yu Wuji provided, stands up from his place and gives him the antidote for the poison of the ice toad which had been attacking his body for 3 days. He walks out and calls out to a beautiful orange-haired lady standing under the moonlight named Ling Yar, and orders her to follow him to the sword graveyard. At the sword grave, a couple of disciples were standing beside a giant graveyard trying to open its door with talismans against the instructions which their master had given them. As soon as the door opens, a large amount of pale green-colored souls rush out of the grave, scaring off the disciples as they run for their lives. The master and the disciple arrive just at that time as Ling Yao exclaims, surprised by the power of the sealed magic weapon. Ning Xuanwu then reveals his ambition and proclaims that everyone will be beneath his feet after he is done with the Qingshan sect. In the Jiangping city, 3 men rush around looking for some medical supplies. It was less than 4 hours till the duel between the Qingshan and Xuanwu sect's masters. The men see that not a single mortal was in sight and deduce they ran away, as if they encountered even a little spiritual power, they would surely not survive and die on spot. As they were worrying about the mortals who they thought had all fled, Yifeng was actually leading the other mortals towards the duel site. They arrive at the highest location in Jiangping City from where the duel could be seen with a glance no matter where it was happening. Using this chance, Yifeng decides to sell binoculars to the onlookers so that he could earn some money while at the same time enjoying himself by watching the duel. While on the field below, Lu Qingshan and Ning Xuanwu both stand in front of each other with proper stances as they get ready for the duel while their respective disciples stand beside them. The battle starts as both kick off from the ground and engage in the air, leaving after images and forming arcs with their Kai. Ning Xuanwu, being stronger than Lu Qingshan, has an upper hand and uses a chance to knock Lu Qingshan out by punching him in the face. Lu Qingshan, knowing he isn't able to win just by relying on his cultivation, decides to take out the magic weapon he got from Yifeng. But as he is about to do so, Ning Xuanwu beckons to him to hurry and take the magic weapon out, which in turn surprises Lu Qingshan as he questions how he found out about his magic weapon. Ning Xuanwu, thinking he had already won, brings out his own magic weapon, the Soul Eater sword, which can be used only once by consuming decades of life, and can easily erode the spiritual power of any weapon. The weapons below the holy objects are like a handful of weapons in front of it. Lu Qingshan takes out the ordinary kitchen knife with an indescribable look on his face as his disciples lament about how no matter what weapon it was gonna get restrained by the Soul Eater. Ning Xuanwu, Ling Yao, and the other Xuanwu sect's disciples all laugh at Lu Qingshan after seeing that he really bought out an ordinary-looking kitchen knife, hurling him with insults like pig and fool at the same time. Lu Qingshan loses his confidence as he gets cornered to the cliff, as has no idea what he should do now that he had lost his momentum. Yifeng, seeing that the fight was gonna be over sooner than he thought, shouts out to Lu Qingshan to do better so that he could earn more money with the binoculars he rented. Lu Qingshan hears the shout and looks over to find out Yifeng standing there above the mountain, and is surprised and delighted at the same time, thinking he came there to cheer him on. Lu Qingshan self-reflects on his timidness after getting the encouragement from Yifeng, and comes to the conclusion of what he actually needs to do. Ning Xuanwu, who was watching from the sidelines till now, finally decides to attack with his sword as Lu Qingshan gets ready to take a swing with his knife. The swing Lu Qingshan takes generates a crescent arc in the sky as it slashes the souls along with Ning Xuanwu's arm. Ning Xuanwu is enveloped by the sword Kai as he screams. Xuanwu sect's disciples watch in horror as the arc travels along while making a deep cut into the earth itself. As Ning Xuanwu gets in trouble after suffering a blow from Lu Qingshan, his sect's disciples all panic as they run around trying to help their master in any way they can. Zhu Yun and the other Qingshan sect disciples take advantage of this situation to attack the Xuanwu sect to kill and send them back to their lair. Lu Qingshan interferes and stops them from chasing after them, afraid that it would make Yifeng displeased. He misunderstands Yifeng as a person who doesn't care about fame and fortune, infers that Yifeng didn't want the destruction of either sides and only wants them to check and keep balance between in order to protect the peace of the people of Jiangping. Yifeng watches from the top of the mountain with a disappointed look on his face. Spectators around him starts leaving, suddenly making him panic as he desperately tries to persuade them by claiming about a fight which would soon happen between the King Kong and Godzilla. But it doesn't work as he's left all alone on the peak. Yifeng, who is walking to his home, comes across Peng Ying, his childhood sweetheart, and tries to tease her in a familiar way which is not seen by Peng Ying in a pleasing way as she brushes off his hand and calls it a misunderstanding. She explains that she had just come there by the order of her master from Qingshan sect, which she recently joined with the help from a senior to find a man of high repute. She had always dreamt of being able to join the Qingshan sect and practice martial arts, but knew she wasn't qualified to do so, and had to her senior to never meet with other men in order to get into the sect. She says goodbye to Yifeng and walks away and meets up with Yu Wuji. He asks her about the senior she was supposed to find and isn't pleased that she talked with another man and slaps off her hand, seeing which Peng Ying tries to hold on desperately as she tries to explain how the mortal she met was just a martial arts hall owner and an insignificant being. She also flatters him by claiming her love for him. Yu Wuji worries about his well-being, fearing the outcome which would occur after Ning Xuanwu recovers from his injuries. He suddenly remembers about how Lan Zhu had bought a martial arts book from a martial hall owner which helped her sect master break through, and questions Peng Ying about the mortal she had just met. After the confirmation from Peng Ying, he suddenly runs off towards the martial hall, laughing hysterically, thinking of ways of using Tomortal as a scapegoat to further help him improve his fate, screaming and thanking heaven for the help he received. At the Xuanwu sect, Ning Xuanwu sits on his throne with one of his amputated arm bandaged as he screams, clearly agitated Yu Wuji, who brought himself to his door without finding out the cause of his defeat. Yu Wuji, scared, tries pleading for himself as he kneels on the ground and tells him about the master who Lu Qingshan got the knife and the martial arts book from. He asks for an opportunity so that he could look more into this matter. Ning Xuanwu doesn't believe that there was a martial master living in Jiangping City who he didn't know yet and wants to see who that martial master was. Linger takes this chance to ask her master to let her handle it, but gets refused by Ning Xuanwu, who already had other plans for them both. The person who he was going to send was Wu Chen. He has blue spiky hair, and with a cocky look on his face he accepts the order for investigation. At the martial arts hall, Zhang King peeks through the door, thinking about how his master hadn't come out in the past 3 days from his room, thinking it was because of the woman he met earlier. He is surprised to see the chaotic situation inside the room as lots of paper is littered around the whole room, and in the midst of it is Yifeng is just casually preparing a barbecue. Zhang King, who offered to support him, after finding out that he wasn't sad at all, gets even more shocked, but again infers that the boss just didn't want to show it to him. He questions about the boss's love, to which Yifeng makes a JoJo face and delivers a really corny line, making Zhang King dumbfounded. Yifeng then orders Zhang King to go sell the books and talks about changing his career in a month, leaving him alone there all by himself. Zhang King, after seeing the book's titles, wonders if these books would really be able to sell or not as he stumbles across his way to the city. In the suburbs of the Jiangping city, a poor man screams in pain, begging for help as his soul gets sucked out of his body by Wu Chen. Just after a while, Wu Chen absorbs the soul in hopes that the guy who ran the martial hall would satisfy him. An old man with a pot belly and wearing white clothes arrives in front of Wu Chen and advises him to not go to Jiangping City anymore. He was on his way to Jiangping City to pay a visit to an old acquaintance and warns him to not play around. Wu Chen gets annoyed and tries to rebuke, but before he could even complete the sentence, the old man strikes with a palm casually. Wu Chen, surprised by the power of the old man, which was above martial realm, still succeed in taking out a sacred stone which helps him dodge the strike successfully. Wu Chen flees from the scene and arrives at the martial arts hall of Yifeng after killing every other people from other martial halls in the city. He rushes towards the door without any care, clearly underestimating the martial arts hall owner. Sacred Stone, an evil object used by the founding ancestor of the Xuanwu sect when he killed the immortals. Even in the face of attacks from the higher realms, it can turn the odds in your favor. Ling Yao, who is standing beside Ning Xuanwu, asks him why he didn't allow him to go. Ning Xuanwu tells her about the sacred stone Wu Chen holds, which could help him easily avoid any trouble so that she doesn't need to worry about the plan failing. While back at the martial arts hall, Wu Chen looks at the nameplate and realizes that the hall didn't even have any name. He treads forward, completely ignoring the nameplate, and just as he steps over the threshold, a sudden pressure erupts from the broken plaque, threatening Wu Chen as he takes out the sacred stone. But it doesn't help with anything at all, as Wu Chen disintegrates into nothingness in a short time, leaving only the sacred stone, which had lost its luster, on the ground where Wu Chen previously was. Yifeng and Zhang King, who find the stone, think that the stone was beautiful and uses it to mend a broken spot in the hall. After a while, a match of Go was going on between the pot-bellied old man and Yifeng as the old man marvels at the skills of his friend. He had come to the hall many times but still hadn't seen through the cultivation level of Yifeng. There were so many secrets in the Xiangjing continent, but he thought that Yifeng had cultivated a technique that made others unable to see through one's cultivation, and still never exaggerated it in the slightest. But if there were such a person alive in the continent, then it would have been to stay an unknown person in the cultivation world. He wonders if Yifeng was really better than him, but has a hard time coming to a conclusion. As he was busy in his own thoughts, Yifeng informs him that it was his turn to play in the game, shocking him when he sees that he had already gotten checkmated by Yifeng. His gaze coincidentally lands on the sacred stone on the ground used to block the threshold. He is surprised to see such a precious weapon getting used for a useless task such as that. He thinks that based on Yifeng's cultivation he should know about the value of the stone. But he still tramples on the treasures like this. Whether it's scheming or a chess game, this person was a bit more powerful than he had thought. And with all the hint he had made, he comes to a realization that they were on completely different level from each other. Though he still thinks that he got underestimated as he pulls out his rake, a sacred weapon, to show to Yifeng, wanting to see his impressed face. He had not only exhausted his possessions but had even lost half of his life in order to obtain the treasure, which was called the Seven-Tooth Holy Rake. Yifeng, who saw the rake, thinks it's rusty and advises him to just throw it away as it wouldn't be of much help in doing farm work. Yifeng misunderstands his intentions and asks for his rake so that he can fix it. The old man soothes in anger as Yifeng goes away with his rake and decides to see what he could ever come up with that can be compared to his seven-tooth holy rake. Zhang King comes at the forging house of the martial hall to inform Yifeng about Lu Qingshan, who had come to meet him to pay his respects. Yifeng asks him to let them rest for a while, and he would come later after he was finished forging the tool for the old man. Lu Qingshan along with Zhu Yun walks into the hall as Zhu Yun questions if there was really anyone leaving in such a shabby place. Lu Qingshan scolds her and tells her to put away her temper in front of an expert so as to not offend him in any way. As they walk, Zhu Yun notices as she steps on a sacred stone and is shocked to see such a weapon being used to mend the threshold. Lu Qingshan suddenly exclaims as he tells her to look ahead of them, making her confused about what her master was talking about. They look ahead as a golden dragon made of kai emerges from the forging room, all flustered, trying to calm down. They are even more surprised after seeing the seven-tooth holy rake, which according to a legend, was a magic weapon which was used by the nine-heaven profound goddess to eradicate the demons in Shenjing. They at first don't believe for it to be real, but after seeing the old man who excluded the same martial intent as the rake and was at least about the realm of martial emperor, are left with no choice but to believe it. They realize that the man looked a bit like the madman who had slaughtered the 6th town of Xiangjing but had been missing for 30 years. The old man with a teacup in his hand suddenly calls out to them both in a menacing manner, making them quiver, but suddenly changes to a polite tone and asks if they had come to meet Brother Yi, to which they agree. Zhu Yun advises that they should leave quickly after giving away the knife and some gifts to the senior, but just as she says it, several dragons rushes out of the forging room as Yifeng takes a last swing with his hammer onto the tool as he finishes off his work. The two aren't able to believe that Yifeng really restored a semi-holy weapon to a true holy weapon, and in panic question about the real identity of Yifeng. But seeing that the old man beside them just sat still on his place even after witnessing such a spectacular sight, they also quiet down a bit. But in fact, the old man was only maintaining a poker face while his inner thoughts were in turmoil. At that moment he realizes just how ridiculous the previous competition comparison was. Yifeng tells him that he just had to pay 50% of the price, but the old man knew that it was something that he wouldn't ever be able to afford. Yifeng, seeing that he stayed silent, thinks that he did not have any money and decides to give the rake to him for free. The old man named Wu Yonghong, moved by his kindness, bows as a show of respect with tears and snot covering his face. Lu Qingshan and Zhu Yun, who are standing beside them after hearing the old man's name, are surprised that he really was the man who they thought he was. Wu Yonghong, taking the rake in his hands, bows to the heaven that he would gladly die for mystery, and if there is a violation, it will result in his destruction as a downpour of rain starts and heavy thunders rages in the skies. While at the side, all this did was make Yifeng feel embarrassed after seeing the old man who was on his deathbed act like this. Heavy thunder rumbles as Lu Qingshan exclaims about seeing the vow of heaven and earth for the first time in his life, claiming that he had no regrets in his life anymore. Zhu Yun questions about the vow as Lu Qingshan explains about it to her. This vow is a kind of contract that can only be signed by martial emperor existences. With heaven and earth as evidence, once signed, an absolute contract will be formed which can never be violated. He thinks about how terrifying the realm of Yifeng would be if even such a person took a vow of heaven and earth for him. Wu Yonghong, who had just formed the contract, asks about what he needed to do to Yifeng, but instead just gets kicked out by him. The rain stops as Yifeng notices the two people from the Qingshan sect standing in front of him and escorts them inside the hall. He finds out that they were there to give him a gift which he accepts. It turns out to be the Qingshan flame orb, which looked like a transparent orange-colored orb. Yifeng thinks it would be good to use it as a warmer in winter, and Lu Qingshan feels glad that he liked the gift they gave, still feeling conflicted in his heart. Yifeng, just to return the favor, gives them a new novel which he recently wrote for a free. Zhu Yun takes the novel in hand as she realizes that it was similar to the book his master used to achieve a breakthrough and was filled with pure martial arts enlightenment. They both bow down to Yifeng and leave in a hurry as Zhu Yun drags her master along with her, excited about the breakthrough she would finally achieve. Just then, Zhang King calls out to his master from behind and tells him that he had gotten the carriage ready for his boss. Yifeng is surprised to see the carriage looking expensive and questions Zhang King about how he got so much money in a short time. All he gets as a reply is a vague answer from Zhang King as he blushes and claims he only wanted to prepare the best for his boss who was going out. Yifeng just lets it go as he goes on to board the carriage, and Zhang King asks him what he was about to do next but doesn't get any solid answer in return. At the Qingshan sect, Lu Qingshan and Zhu Yun both try to take the book for themselves as they fight for it. Finally, after getting beat by her master, Zhu Yun concedes as Lu Qingshan takes the book from her. Zhu Yun questions his master why such a great power was staying in a little city like Jiangping City. Lu Qingshan reveals to her that in the ancient times, Jiangping was the place where immortal families used to practice, and that Yifeng might not be completely unrelated to them and was most likely preparing for the next big event. Yifeng enters the Pingjiang Chamber of Commerce with his book, wanting to make a deal to improve his financial situation. A person notices him and leads him to Boss Mao's room. In the room, Mao Lin offers tea to Yifeng as they discuss about publishing a new book, but Mao Lin refuses to help him publish the book, as he thinks of them as just silly fairy tales which couldn't possibly be profitable to his business. Mao Lin asks if there's anything else he can help with to Yifeng, but he gets coldly rejected, as Yifeng stands up abruptly and leaves the chamber. Just after he leaves, Mao Lin's daughter Yuna comes dashing out in a cheerful manner and asks her dad if the person who just left was the author of her favorite book, and when her dad was going to introduce her to him as promised. Her dad gets annoyed by the fact that she was getting addicted to reading and not studying business properly, and tells her that they will not be publishing any of his books anymore, as he rips apart the book he held in his hand. Yuna starts crying as she tries to argue with her father, but Mao Lin angrily orders his servant to lock her up in her room without wanting to hear any words from her. While outside at the gate of the chamber, Yifeng is sitting alone contemplating about life as Luo Lai and Lan Zhu suddenly arrive before him and asks what he was doing there. He tells them about his situation, and Lan Zhu is surprised to hear that he actually wrote books while handing him a basket of fruits as a gift. Luo Lai tries asking Lan Zhu about the book she was reading recently, but in a panic Lan Zhu tries to shut her up by pinching her butt. Luo Lai, who couldn't handle the pain, suddenly transforms into her masculine form, surprising Lan Zhu and scaring Yifeng. Yifeng then takes a fruit out of the basket and takes a bite, as Lan Zhu from the sides looks at him, admiring him with a blush on her face. Luo Lai, who saw all this, tries to help her in her own way and proposes to Yifeng that she would help him publish his books. Yifeng excitedly asks if what she said was true, to which Luo Lai replies that it will be very easy because her father was the chairman of the Baofeng Chamber of Commerce. But then she suddenly adds in a condition that Yifeng would need to kiss Lan Zhu if he wanted to publish his books, making Lan Zhu dumbstruck as Yifeng stands behind her with an anticipating look on his face. Luo Lai repeats her condition again, as Yifeng stands there not knowing what to do, as he had always been single and never in love with zero experience. He clenches his fists as he finally had a chance to get in touch with a lady. He then holds Lan Zu by her chin as he closes in with tears in his eyes uttering some nonsense. But Lan Zu, who heard his words, is surprised and misunderstands the meaning behind it. As she leaps away thinking that Yifeng, who was crying, was doing this out of pity as she was too weak. She considers herself unworthy of dual cultivating with Yifeng and apologizes to him. Luo Lai is surprised to see that she was unwilling to do it even when Yifeng himself was willing, but Lan Zu interjects again and leads them to the Baofeng Commerce Chamber. Yifeng just gives up as he confirms that there was no such thing as a good thing in the world. They arrive at the Baofeng Commerce Chamber and are greeted by Luo Lai's dad, Yingxing. Luo Lai leaps at his father as he catches her and then tells her to learn to control herself as she had suddenly gained muscles, making him kneel on the ground, damaging the tiles, but Luo Lai just pouts while crossing her arms. After a while, Yifeng is sitting on a chair eating snacks given to him by Luo Lai as Yingxing asks Lan Zu about the identity of Mr. Yi. He is surprised to find out that even the sect master of Qingshan sect had to respect that person, and then soon comes in front of Yifeng trying to curry a favor from him. He orders his men to do their best in helping Yifeng publish his books. An old man who stood beside Yingxing interjects, telling him that their chamber only focused on supplying jewelry for cultivators, and if they get distracted by publishing a book, the market would soon get invaded by the Pingjiang chamber. Just as he finishes speaking, a leg comes rushing at his face, knocking him to the ground. Yifeng, who heard all this, tries to say that it was unnecessary, but Yingxing still lies his way through, wanting to help him in any way possible, after which Yifeng thanks him for his help. A few days later, under the full operation of Baofeng Chamber, Yifeng's book was published. The love, hatred, and the enmity of the two protagonists in the book aroused the resonance of countless people, and the first edition of the book was quickly swept away. As a result, a book-chasing craze emerged in the city and even spread to the outside of the city. While at the Qingshan sect, Lan Zu is sitting on a rock while holding Yifeng's book in her hands, making a deary expression, when suddenly Zhu Yun lands in front of her and questions her what happened in the sect while she was in retreat. Lan Zu explains that it was all most likely related to Yifeng's book. Zhu Yun, who saw that it was Yifeng's book in front of her, grabs it suddenly as he flies back to go in retreat for 2 days. Meanwhile, in the Gianting city, crowds were gathered because of the popularity of the book, as they all discussed among themselves, and some even trying to reenact the scenes from the book. In the city, the crowd notices a shady person who had his face covered with a cloth and shouts at him, making him hurriedly leave the place. The person who was chased out turns out to be Yu Wuji, and he meets with another guy wearing a hat who's laughing at him. They had been searching for Wu Chen but still hadn't found him, so the guy with the hat suggests they give up and go back, to which Yu Wuji refuses, thinking the old man would surely have another move planned for them. At the Pingjiang Chamber of Commerce, a meeting is ongoing with many leaders attending it as they discuss about the chamber rankings. Because of the books sold by Baofeng Chamber, they had a really high chance of ranking number 1 this time, which made all the people present worried. One person points out that the author of the book had come to the chairman first but was declined by the chairman, and that decision of his has made the entire chamber to suffer. He asks him to take responsibility, slightly hinting at him that his position would be at risk otherwise. Mao Lin gets angered and lashes out at others and orders them to prepare a gift and follow him to visit Mr. Yi. At the martial arts gym kitchen, Zhang King asks his master about what happened to eating meat after they had sold the meat while carrying a bunch of vegetables in hand. Yifeng answers while holding a tofu in hand and then tosses it in the air and is about to cut it with his knife when the butler from the Baofeng chamber arrives outside and beckons to them. Yifeng utters some gibberish to Zhang King and rushes out to greet the butler. The butler, who saw Yifeng excitedly swinging his knife around, misunderstands the action, thinking Mr. Yu was blaming him for being late. He hurriedly asks for his forgiveness and hands him the exclusive deposit card prepared by them with 100,000 gold in it. Yifeng is so surprised by the amount he drops his knife to the ground and just stands there unmoving. He takes the card and laughs creepily, but then tries to control his expression, making it look even weird. The butler, who got weirdest out, takes his leave, thinking he should hurry and report Mr. Yi's attitude to the chairman. Yifeng is so happy that he goes to Zhang King and the dog and kisses them both on the cheeks, and starts jumping around, but suddenly stops completely when he sees Mao Lin standing at the door making a weird expression. He composes himself really quickly and asks them for the reason they came here. Mao Lin says it was to apologize to him and gifts him 1,000 gold as an apology. He makes a smug expression, thinking 1,000 gold was a really big amount for ordinary people, and waits to see his impressed expression. Yifeng is not impressed as he tells him to say things directly. Mao Lin again offers for them to work together in publishing the book, stating that he would surely forget what happened in the past, as he was not a stingy person. But Yifeng, not wanting to associate himself with him anymore, refuses, saying he was indeed a stingy person, annoying Mao Lin, making him lash out abruptly again. but he still composes himself quickly and tries to talk with Yifeng again, offering a final price of 10,000, but Yifeng just shows him his exclusive card, seeing which, Mao Lin is so dumbstruck that drool starts dripping out of his mouth. Yifeng goes back inside as Zhang King escort Mao Lin out of the gym. Yifeng again starts jumping around excitedly, exclaiming how cool all of this was. Back at the Xuanwu sect, Ning Xuanwu's disciple reports to her master about the search for Wu Chen, which was unsuccessful. Ning Xuanwu calls for Wu Feng and he suddenly appears covered with a long blue cloth and orders him to go look for Wu Chen. He disappears and Linger asks if everything would be alright this time. Ning Xuanwu tells her about the cloak of swiftness which Wu Feng had, which made him unrivaled in speed, and that even if someone could detect his movements, they would still not be able to see the real body, making it so that no one can hurt him. Yifeng and Zhang King pack their stuff as they prepare a carriage to leave for Baofeng Chamber of Commerce. He tells Wang Kai to behave properly while he is away and then prepares to leave. Wang Kai, fearing the outcome where he would be made into dog stew, has no choice but to act like a dog. Wang Kai then talks about how he wanted to escape the place but is afraid after seeing the paintings his master casually made, making him even more fearful of the power it contained. He suddenly feels a powerful pressure on him as he jolts back when Wu Feng arrives outside the martial hall. He gets frustrated when an old mortal man passes in front of him very slowly, whom he then kills and continues forward. He could feel Wu Chen's last vestiges here and decides to kill everyone at the place, releasing even more of his aura. Wang Kai runs back inside really scared, but then suddenly various attacks shoot out from the paintings attacking Wu Feng, completely killing him with only his bones left behind. Wang Kai, finally relieved, starts crying as the figure from the painting comforts him. He finally understands the power of his master and decides to become the best dog for his master and refine his mind and cultivation along with it. At the Baofeng Chamber meeting, everyone along with Lan Zhu discusses how Yifeng played a big role in making them ranked 1 in Commerce Chamber rankings and decide to hand over more money than usual to Yifeng for it. While out in the marketplace, Yu Wuji is standing outside a market contemplating about his situation, which could lead to Ning Xuanwu being angry with him. Ping Yang, who was with him, is done picking things and the shop owner comes out to ask for the money to Yu Wuji. Yu Wuji gets angry that a mere mortal asked him for money and picks him up by collar when Ping Yang suddenly starts shouting when she sees Yifeng passing by, thinking he was following her. Yifeng denies her claim when Yu Wuji comes towards him. Ping Yang tries to please him by holding his arm, and Yu Wuji, seeing that it was just a mortal, attacks him out of nowhere. Suddenly, Lan Zhu comes in front of Yifeng and blocks his attack while also rebounding it to hurt Yu Wuji. He is surprised and questions why Lan Zhu was there as he falls backwards when Luo Lai also comes in his sight and then gets punched to the face, knocking him out. Peng Ying exclaims out loud, all scared, and Lan Zhu and Luo Lai both comes in front of Yifeng and asks for his forgiveness. Yifeng thanks them, and Peng Ying, seeing all this, can't seem to come to an answer as to why the personal disciple of Qingshan sect would be so respectful to a mortal. Lan Zhu then asks Peng Ying her name and checks for her qualifications, which she finds simply not enough and expels her at the spot from Qingshan sect. Peng Ying screams out that why they did all this to her for just a mortal, but before she can finish her sentence, she gets slapped to the face and gets warned by Lan Zhu to not ever be disrespectful to Mr. Yi anymore or she would erase her whole existence from the world. She just sits there with her face covered in blood, tears and snot, again questioning her situation and that she had to find out what in the hell was going on. At the Xuanwu sect, both Ning Xuanwu and Linger were cultivating when Ning Xuanwu notices that his disciple was uncomfortable and asks her what worry she had. She explains that the martial expert in Jiangping City was clearly extraordinary and that sending her 2 brothers was a careless move. Ning Xuanwu understands that Wu Chen and Wu Feng were no match for the expert when his disciple asks him to let her go do the investigation, which he allows. Linger arrives at the Jiangping City and enters a shop. She calls out to a waiter and asks for the information on the mysterious expert. The waiter asks for money, but instead, she takes out a knife and stabs it on the table, scaring the shit out of the waiter as he suddenly tells her that the name of that person was Yifeng. Yifeng also arrives back at his hall and is greeted by Wang Kai and hands him a gift he had bought for him. But Wang Kai runs back inside and comes back again with Wu Feng's bone in his mouth. Yifeng takes the bone from him but doesn't really care much about it. But that action is misunderstood by Wang Kai again, making his reverence for his master increase even more than before. Zhang King also calls out to Yifeng and shows him a tattered cloak of swiftness, which Yifeng mistakes as just a rag and decides to start cleaning the house with it as it hadn't been cleaned in a long time. Yifeng, who had the bone in hand, thinks that it was a pity to throw the bone away, so he decides to just use it as a toy and throws it away and tells Wang Kai to fetch it. The bone heads towards the entrance where Linger had just arrived, and she catches the bone with Wang Kai stuck on the other hand of it. She is scared shitless that she vomited out blood and almost faints, surprising Yifeng. He catches her and tells her to rest for a while, but she jumps back, refusing him. Yifeng, who saw her trying to get the bone from Wang Kai's mouth, thinks that it most likely belonged to her family, so she came to get it back. She misinterprets the meaning behind this sentence and thinks she had been seen through and fled fearing for his life. Wang Kai is again impressed that his master saw through her cultivation so easily and that he really had a deep mind and high level of cultivation. Back in Xuanwu sect, she reports that it was indeed the master who stayed there who killed both her brothers. Ning Xuanwu orders her to tell everything to him in detail, which she does. She describes what happened with Wu Feng's bones in the Cloak of Swiftness and also the heaven-devouring stone which was used to fill in the steps. Ning Xuanwu is so angry he punches the pillar beside him, creating a crater on it. He then suddenly starts laughing maniacally and asks her what else there was. She then tells him about his warning, making Ning Xuanwu rage even more as he orders his whole sect to go down the mountain with him to avenge his disciples and get back their treasures. In the Jiangping city, every master of the Xuanwu sect are currently gathered around Ning Xuanwu as his disciple introduces her dead soldier, Jiang San. Ning Xuanwu orders him to go find out more about the expert, and Linger warns him that the expert was not simple and that he should not show any hostility to him. Ning Xuanwu suddenly remembers that terrifying magic weapon and thinks that his strength must be far beyond that of a realm of martial king, and if he was provoked he would get angry. Ning Xuanwu then tells Jiang San to not worry and that if he didn't make it back he would support his whole family, and also tells him to not run away if he did not want to die. Jiang San asks what would happen if he made it back, and Ning Xuanwu agrees to make him a sect disciple directly with an option to choose any elder to be his master. Back at the martial hall, Yifeng was lying on his chair with Wang Kai beside him and Zhang King cleaning the hall. He decides to take down the paintings for a while and have them lie down on the floor when a shout comes from outside. Zhang King tells his master to just rest and that he would go and greet the visitor. Jiang San, who entered the gym, finds everything normal and no different from ordinary martial arts gyms, even not as good as other gyms. Yifeng tries to coax him into joining the gym when Jiang San nervously blurts out the name of Xuanwu sect, asking for directions. He gets really worried that the same thing that happened with Wu brothers would happen to him too, but Yifeng without any care just gives him the directions. He looks at Yifeng's eyes and confirms that he was just a mortal and the speculation of Yao Ling was completely wrong. He still tries to use sarcasm to anger him to find out if he really was an expert or not, but he doesn't get the expected reaction from him, confirming his claims even more. Jiang San then turns around and starts skipping around with a blissful face, thinking about his promotion in the sect, and leaves the hall. Yifeng, seeing all just this, scoffs at him, thinking it was pathetic to be stupid at such a young age. Suddenly 4 people land behind him, scattering the winds everywhere. Yifeng turns around and is greeted by Wu Yonghong, who introduces the friends he had bought with him. Then being Chu Shiguang, Sun Juge and Lai Mozai, with them all being at the martial ancestor realm. Yifeng leads the men inside as Wu Yonghong asks if they were disturbing him. Just as they're about to go in, Chu Shiguang stops Wu Yonghong and asks him how a mere mortal can be worthy of inviting martial ancestors in. Other guy also questions about the signboard, which they could not see anywhere. Wu Yonghong just gets annoyed as he tells them to be careful of what they say and that if they didn't believe him, they should leave and not cause trouble for him. Just then, Sun Juge points at the heaven-shattering rock being used to mend the steps. The 3 of them gets really surprised and finally enter the hall, thinking it really was not a loss to make a trip here. They then see the Cloak of Swiftness hanging and are again dumbfounded, seeing it was a treasure of imperial grade. They ask what it was doing there, to which Yifeng replies that it was just a rag used to clean the martial gym. Hearing this, they all go quiet for a while and then greet Yifeng like they would their masters, asking for forgiveness. They speculate that Yifeng must be a martial saint. On the other side, Zhang King finishes putting the paintings back on the walls and it suddenly releases a mass amount of Kai, leaving the 4 so dumbstruck they start acting weird. Yifeng then tells them to sit at the front hall while he goes to take the chessboard in pieces. The 4 sitting there suddenly scream out, feeling the martial intent in the air, making them overrule their speculation of Yifeng not being a martial saint but an immortal warlord. The martial intent is too strong for them to handle, so they rush outside and put the chair beside the door and sit there. Yifeng, who came back, sees them sitting outside and asked why they were doing so. They refuse out of courtesy, and Yifeng doesn't bother with them anymore and orders Zhang King to hang the signboard outside. The 4 old men cry tears of gratitude after misunderstanding the act of Yifeng, making them look even uglier than before. Even the passerbys are surprised to see them bawling their eyes out. Back at the Xuanwu sect, Jiang San arrives back and reports to Ning Xuanwu that Yifeng was just a mortal and not any expert. He assumes that the Wu brothers might not be dead at all and that all this was just a misunderstanding. He even swears on the heaven and earth that what he said was all true. Ning Xuanwu gets furious that a mortal actually dared to be a pain in the ass for his Xuanwu sect while releasing his murderous intent. He orders his sect to follow him to this martial arts gym, which could supposedly kill people, as they all rush forward at the same time. Ning Xuanwu and his sect rushes through the city roads, pushing aside anything in their way without any care for the mortals who are running away from them. They arrive at Yifeng's martial hall as Yao Ling points out 4 old men sitting in front of the door sipping their tea quietly. Ning Xuanwu doesn't take them seriously at all and heads towards them, meaning to kill them with a stike. He arrives in front of Wu Yonghong, who, feeling the movement, suddenly opens his eyes and sees Ning Xuanwu heading towards him with his palms stretched out. Just then, Ning Xuanwu notices that the auras of the four belong to martial ancestors. Martial ancestor Lai Mozai, he possesses a fortune-telling abacus which is a unique sacred relic of heaven and earth. Then there's Chu Shiguang, a peerless madman. After rebelling against the sect, he not only slaughtered the sect, but also polished the skulls of all the people in the sect into artifacts and hung them on his body. Martial ancestor Sun Juge was born with deformity. His meridians were all broken since he was young, but later he practiced evil skills and changed his fate. Lastly, martial ancestor Wu Yonghong, who possesses a nine-toothed holy rake, was once cheated by a man. As a result, he slaughtered the whole city in a rage. Many martial experts gathered to stop him, but they all ended up dead as he sliced them all up. Ning Xuanwu is beyond surprised as he questions why the four great madmen who had long disappeared from the world were doing in front of a small martial arts gym. Just as he turns around to run out, Sun Jude stretches out his hand and catches his leg. Yao Ling and the others, seeing this, try to go and help their master but are all blocked by a barrier. Sun Jude then releases a deadly spell on them, which leads to Yao Ling losing all of her clothes and vomiting out blood, suffering internal injuries along with it. Ning Xuanwu, scared, asks them what they were doing in front of a small martial gym and that he only wanted to destroy the gym and meant no harm to them. Hearing this aggress them even more and they try to catch him when Ning Xuanwu suddenly starts slapping himself on his face asking for forgiveness. Wu Yonghong also stops them as he didn't want Yifeng's floor to be dirty by what they did. Ning Xuanwu, hearing the name of the senior, becomes curious about the identity of that person as he starts hitting his head on ground apologizing again. Just then Yifeng comes out and is greeted by the four old men. Ning Xuanwu, after finally seeing Yifeng, can't believe that such a normal-looking mortal was actually a hidden expert. They then ask him what they should do with Ning Xuanwu, and Ning Xuanwu, hearing this, finally understood that his life was in the hand of this mysterious expert. Yifeng is suddenly presented with a question about what they should do with Ning Xuanwu, but Yifeng, not wanting to bother with them any longer, just tells them to do whatever they want to do with him and leaves to buy the eggs. And the four of them, as usual, interpret that casual sentence in a profound way and thanks Yifeng for the guidance as they reflect on their actions. Wu Yonghong then asks Ning Xuanwu to take out his storage bag, which he without any hesitation takes out and gives it to them. Wu Yonghong tells him to get up, and taking this chance he starts sprinting away but gets attacked by Sun Juge, causing him to lose his other arm. He gets affected by the celestial poison which would spread all over his body in just 3 days. They tell him that this is what Mr. Yi meant, to not take your like directly, and that whether he would live or die will depend on his luck, as Sun Juge punches him on the face, making him fly far away over the horizon. Back in the Xuanwu sect, Ning Xuanwu angrily kicks Yang San in the chest. He asks for forgiveness, but Ning Xuanwu doesn't give him any time and directly decapitates him while fuming with anger. One person present there then asks him if they would continue their revenge, but Ning Xuanwu orders the sect to let go of their hatred and that this was the end of the feud between the Xuanwu sect and that martial arts gym, as he stomps on Yang San's dead body, piercing through it. Yao Ling, who is standing there with only a small white cloth covering her body, asks his master what actually was in that gym while cowering in fear. Ning Xuanwu tells them about the existence of the martial ancestors and one martial saint, even martial emperor. He tells them that now it was more important to guard against the Qingshan sect, as they had gotten really close to the martial expert from Jiangping City, and with the help from him they would sooner or later wipe out their Xuanwu sect. So he decides that they should get as close as possible with the young man as well, and orders Yao Ling to use her body to seduce Yifeng. But Yao Ling acts afraid as she is not sure if he will like her, but under the persuasion of her master when finally agrees to it. In the Pingjiang Chamber of Commerce, Mao Lin is sitting in a pensive state when his daughter comes in the room and asks what she was called for. Mao Lin then asks her daughter about her opinion on the author who wrote Dream of Red Mansions and Supreme Treasure. Yuna blushes and covers her cheeks and says that he must be a handsome man from the way he writes, looking clearly smitten by him. Mao Lin takes this chance and tells her to win over Yifeng so that he can compete with Baofeng's sales, and Yuna too readily agrees to it without any hesitation. Yao Ling is also seen prepared with her honey trap ready to seduce Yifeng with her beauty. Back in the martial hall, Zhang King tells Yifeng about the gifts the four men left for them. As Wang Kai dances around the treasures, as getting even one of these is hard for any ordinary cultivator, and his master just got them without even doing anything. Yifeng picks up a treasure and inspects it, but is disappointed and sighs, calling them all just pieces of junk and that they should just given him some money instead. He then picks up an umbrella and imagines himself cosplaying a character as he sings a song from a popular series from his previous world. Zhang King and Wang Kai don't understand what he did, but Wang Kai is still very impressed by whatever it was. Yifeng orders them to pick up the stuff and follow him to put it all in the utility room. After a while, Yifeng is lying on his reclined chair as Wang Kai, all scared and whimpering, wonders what was kept in that room which continuously released a deep and terrifying aura from inside. Outside the hall, Yingxing and Lan Zhu arrive to present an invitation to Yifeng for that year's poetry conference. Yifeng casually opens the door and asks them why the invitation was delivered to him personally by the head when the attending criteria was very high. Yingxing explains that it was all because of his book that he was now considered a top literary figure in all of Jiangping City and gives him the invitation card. Yifeng takes the card and agrees to attend. The annual poetry conference finally opened on the bank of Chengxi River in Jiangping City. Here, young talents of the whole Jiangping City gathered. Here, they don't judge people by their strength or family background, but only by their literary talent. A big crowd is gathered in the plaza as people exclaim when the 4 great talents of Jiangping City were going to write the poems. Yifeng also arrives wearing black and round glasses. He hears the poems of the 4 but is so disappointed by it he even questions if they really were talents at all. He calls out to a bystander but is ignored, which leads to him lashing out at him and then walk away from the place. Yao Ling, who had studied everything about Yifeng, had found out that he wanted to experience life of a mortal, so she herself also took the form of a mortal. She deliberately trips and falls towards Yifeng while being smug about her trap, which she was sure he would fall for, but instead of catching her. Yifeng, after noticing her, moves out of the way to dodge her as she gets caught by the 4 great talents instead. Yao Ling gets frustrated looking at their lustrous faces and ends up using her strength to hit them hard, making them fly away. She notices another girl looking for Yifeng, making her surprised. While the girl in question, Mao Yun, looks at the portrait of Yifeng and then at him and finally calls out to him, introducing herself while blushing. But Yifeng, after hearing her say Pingjiang Commerce Chamber, completely ignores her and walks away. Mao Yun is on the verge of crying when Yao Ling also comes in from behind and mocks her for what they did before. Mao Yun also turns around furiously and questions her who she was as they both clash with their bodies, especially the chest, touching each other as they glare at each other. The crowd is pleased to watch this scene as many get nosebleeds from the sight while some act jealous of Yifeng. Meanwhile, as Yifeng was walking around, a shout comes from behind him. It was Peng Ying again shouting at him, thinking he was following her, and warns him, but Yifeng doesn't bother turning around and is about to leave when Peng Ying grabs his shoulder and trash talks him even more. Yifeng finally gets frustrated and is about to turn around when Mao Yun comes in between them and suddenly slaps Peng Ying on the face. Peng Ying is furious that a mortal dared to hit her in the face, scaring away Mao Yun as the crowd starts gossiping among themselves about the situation. She is about to attack Mao Yun using her martial arts but is again slapped hard suddenly by Yao Ling, making her fall to the ground. Yao Ling introduces herself as a fan of Yifeng, making Peng Ying even more furious as she notices she was also just a loser with no cultivation and prepares to attack her with full force.